Hey folks, today I want to offer you something. Now, this is not the church's teaching on the book of Revelation. I don't know if I've ever read this anywhere or somehow absorbed this idea anywhere. This is just my thought. It's the way I think I'm beginning to formulate my image of that book. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying you should follow it. I'm offering it to you, and actually in the hopes, I think, that you'll share back what you think, and maybe we can come to an even broader understanding of that book that is often seen as so terrifying to so many people. The other day, of course, I did a video about the precursor to the Mark of the Beast, and that got people talking, and there was some stuff thrown my way that you could hear the fear, right? Like, I mean, literally people telling me that they're afraid of the end times, that they're afraid of what it would mean for them, that they're afraid of how it might impact them, the decisions that they think they would be forced to make, that kind of thing. And so I think I want to open up the book a little bit more from a very, very macro perspective. When I was a computer programmer, we did a lot of work with a process, with a method called object-oriented programming. And what that means is, when you wrote a program, you could write millions of lines of code. And inside those lines of code, you would often see packages, parts where, of maybe 5 to 50 lines of code that did exactly the same thing as another piece of code. And what we would do is we would take that code out and we would create something called an object. And the object did exactly what that code did. And so rather than writing those 50 lines, you would just call the object. And the object would do its work over here. And then later on, when you had to call the object in, when you had to do that work again, you'd call the object again. And so it saved programmers huge, vast amounts of time, because you didn't have to go through the hassle of rewriting, rejigging, and hoping it works, hoping the code worked perfectly. You just call the object. And you would do that for the great big things, and as the programming got better and better and better, you do it for increasingly smaller things. Anything to save yourself some time, anything to save yourself some room within the program. I kind of see Revelation that way. There are parts of the book that I see as unique, one-time affairs. It happened, and it's never going to happen again. And then there's other times in the book where I see things that happen repeatedly, over and over and over and over and over again. And then there's other parts in the book where I see it happening every century, every few decades, whatever the case might be. I guess what I'm getting at is I think I'm beginning to look at the book of Revelation not necessarily as a book that describes the end times of the human race and of the world, and rather as a book that describes end times as they come, ends of ages, ends of social structures, ends of ideologies, ends of reigns of monarchs, ends of nations. These could be huge international affairs. They could be big national events. Maybe they're smaller personal events, things that are just going on unique to our lives. But when you read that book, you can often see how a person or an ideology is lifted up. Everybody clamors to them, they support them, they praise them, they put them above all other things. And then that person, that ideology, it crashes. And when it crashes, it leaves massive destruction. And people don't know where to turn, and people are lost, and people are disenfranchised. And then it starts up again, and something else steps into play. And for what it's worth, the Bible is filled with these cyclical stories. The book of Judges is a wonderful example. It's not just about a story that has a beginning and an end. It's a continuous cycle of a story. The people praised God, they loved God, they followed God. They began to do their own things, and soon they forgot about God. And then bad things started happening to them, and they cried out to God. And God sent them a hero. And with God's power, that hero, they fixed everything. And the people praised God, and they loved God, and they were happy with God. And then they went about their business, and they forgot about God. Bad things happened to them. They called out to God. God saves them. Cycle repeats. We see that throughout the course of human history. The story of the Israelites walking through the wilderness, those 40 years in the wilderness, we see that again in the book of Judges on a smaller scale. Then we see it again and again and again through the time of the kings. Right up into present day today. In our nations today, we still see the story of the Israelites. We see the story of the people in Judges. We see the stories of the people related to us in the Bible, and we can see that in our world today. It's a cycle. It's not a timeline with a beginning and an end. It's a cycle. Revelation, I don't believe Revelation simply speaks to us of the end times. I think it offers us an idea of what we can look for as we cycle through this life. What to look for, what to recognize, how to act, where to offer our allegiance, where to stand strong. As we see these beasts come forward, as we see these ideologies come forward, as we see these politicians, these generals, these dictators, these kings and queens come forward, it warns us. It was a warning to the people in the time of the Romans with Nero. It was a warning to the people throughout the course of history as dictators came along and they cried out saying, oh, this person, this thing is obviously the beast. This is obviously the mark. Oh, but the end never came. The end of the world never came. But the end of an age may have. The end of a time may have. The end of a movement may have come. I'm interested to see what you think. I know this was very brief. I know this was very broad, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say about this thought experiment. Maybe you need to correct me. Maybe you need to put me in my place. Maybe you can expand upon what I'm offering. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray that you and I will see the cycles that exist throughout history, that we can see them in today's world, that we can flex and adjust with them. Amen.